Welcome everyone to Tapes on Trial, where we dissect media and tell you if it deserves a reaping or not. I'm your favorite undead judge, the Reaper of the Tapes. Now, let's talk about Goosebumps.
Goosebumps was a TV show that was created in the 90s that was based off a string of successful books that were published by Scholastics and written by R.L. Stine, who was also popular for his Fear Street book series. The question is, though, is the Goosebumps TV series good? Well, today we're delving into one of the most popular episodes, which is also the first in the series. Viewers beware, you're in for a scare.
Viewers beware, you're in for a scare.
We're first introduced to Carly Beth and her friend Sabrina. As they're out to pick up a pumpkin for Halloween, they discover a Halloween novelty shop, which easily catches Carly Beth's eye. Carly Beth is paranoid, but with good reason, as the two local bullies decide to scare her. Hell, even Sabrina attempted to scare her. Carly Beth is really tired of the bullshit, and I don't blame her. Carly Beth goes home to see that her mother has made a replica sculpture of her face, as well as a duck costume based on one of her old requests, to which her little brother Noah scares her with. The next day, the two bullies decide to prank her again, which gets her on her last nerve, as Carly Beth decides it's time to get even with her bullies, by running to the novelty shop so she can find something scary, which she does upon her viewing of the forbidden back room. Carly Beth is approached by the shopkeeper who tries to stop her, as she doesn't understand why she can't buy one of the masks. I guess it's rather hard to explain that the masks are real, being made of real flesh and having a mind of their own. It is mentioned that he doesn't think she can take responsibility, and deep down he doesn't want to be responsible for turning her ugly.
I don't think.
These masks, they're so real looking.
Take the responsibility.
She doesn't listen though, and grabs the mask while throwing money at him, quickly escaping the store while the angry shop owner closes up behind her, rather than just chasing her down. I'm assuming because his age is catching up with him. Now, I understand that Carly Beth is still a child, but I think she should be old enough to know the difference between right and wrong, and I don't believe revenge would overtake someone as pure as her like that. I get she paid for the mask, but no means no. He has a right to tell her what's for sale and what obviously isn't. When it comes down to it, even she questioned her actions.
What am I doing?
Carly Beth tries the mask on, scaring her brother, in which comes the first problem, which is that her voice changes and that she can't easily take the mask off. She does the dumb thing and puts the mask back on and lies to her mom about wearing her duck costume, while then taking the plaster head that is obviously meant for display only. And Carly Beth scares some kids on the way to Sabrina's house while wondering where Chuck and Steve are, which makes you realize that Sabrina is the only one with common sense out of the two of them, as she tends to ask too many questions, and by even asking Carly Beth to take the mask off, in which Carly Beth violently shakes Sabrina.
Carly Beth, that's gross. It feels so warm.
Be quiet, Sabrina.
I think you should take it off.
Be quiet.
I think it's really disgusting.
I said!
But it's too weird for words.
Let me tell you, if this weren't a kid's show, I would have been really worried, as this is one of the most scary parts in the episode for me personally. Carly Beth goes up to the first house and is honestly rude as hell to the family who opened the door. Sabrina hates it too, so Carly Beth decides to split from Sabrina so she can go find her two tormentors, who are fittingly in a graveyard. The two mind their business, going as far as scaring each other until Carly Beth comes and finishes them off, scarring them for life, along with the strangest thing being the talking plaster head,
Help me.
which she buries then after. Sabrina finally finds Carly Beth as Carly Beth explains what she is doing all night. They return to Sabrina's place to find out there is no normal way to get the mask off, as it's become part of Carly Beth's skin. So the only logical answer is to go back to where this all started, the novelty shop, where the shop owner explains that he can't remove the mask because it's become her real face. He explains that these masks are called the unloved ones because they rot quickly. The shop owner explains that only a symbol of love can get the mask off, meaning the plaster sculpture. Just then the masks come to life and somehow start floating to the graveyard after her, where she digs up the plaster head and wards them off and is able to finally get the mask off once more. She finally returns home to greet her family, only for her brother to instantly make her cry and run to her mother for the much-needed comfort. The episode ends with Noah putting on the mask, making for one more horrific sight.
Trick or treat!
Now, This is the part we've all been waiting for. Does this episode deserve a reaping and be sent to the afterlife? Or is this episode going to get a pass? Well...
The story is strong. As many know, it's a staple of the franchise. And sure, there may have been a few changes in comparison to the book, but there are changes that not only make it work, but truly make it a memorable experience. I'd actually dare to debate as to whether or not these changes might have been better.
Some of the big noticeable changes from the book happen to be the shopkeeper. When he's introduced, he not only warns Carly Beth about the mask, but when Carly Beth asks for the mask, the shopkeeper literally sells it to her and even offers a bag. But in the episode, the shopkeeper refuses to sell the mask.
With this having such a small cast, the story gives everyone something to do. The problem with the story tends to stem from what isn't explained, like the talking plaster head, as well as the floating mask, but maybe that just adds to the creep factor, as well as the psychological level of the show. Regardless, if you ask anyone about Goosebumps, fan or not, they'll probably bring up this story because it grabs you and just doesn't let go. And that's saying something considering this is one of the few 1-hour episodes in the series. Most horror anthologies usually have about an hour runtime, which gives time to actually develop the characters and develop the story. For Goosebumps having about 20 minutes, with these episodes being an exception, it tells you just how much was actually put into this episode. For the cinematography and effects, I think it's safe to say they did pretty well, honestly. Because let's be honest, this is a television show during the 90s aimed at children, so obviously not everything is going to be perfect. For a show that is similar to Are You Afraid of the Dark, you can only expect so much. Many people actually compare the two shows and say that Goosebumps had superior camera work and effects, but Are You Afraid of the Dark had better stories to tell, which I do believe is the case a good portion of the time. So how good is this episode? Well, again, seeing as this episode is one of the hour-long episodes, the camera work doesn't really slack at all. You can't expect master camera work, but it is far better than anyone gives it credit for, from the moment you meet our characters all the way to the last creepy look at the mask. For effects, what can I say? The opening is memorable with the green ooze, which I can only think would be monster blood, which they did because red blood wouldn't be a good image for children, and it would be too costly to change every episode like they would do for the book covers. So I guess that's partially where they get a bit cheap, especially since it was a Fox production. For the mask, the floating effects were pretty decent. They kept the mask distant enough from the camera so you can't really notice things like wires or possible use of green or blue screen. The only thing really noticeable was slow motion. The talking and blinking plaster of Paris head makes you question. Regardless of what was done, they didn't really make it look all that cheap. The cheapest things in the episode were probably the use of worms early on in the episode.
As for the music is pretty entertaining, as the opening theme is considered a classic by many.
Goosebumps. You will beware. You're in for a scare.
And the background music is used very well, working in almost every situation, creating a feeling of suspense whenever possible. And for the 90s, I will say it surely leaves an impression. It doesn't have that I Know What You Did Last Summer or that Scream soundtrack that a lot of people reuse in a lot of later movies. So I will say it is very original.
Now it's time to talk about the cast and characters. For our lead, I feel that Catherine Long was a pretty good, if not great choice for Carly Beth, and I can tell you why. Carly Beth has an innocence that is proven very youthful. Only a handful of actresses could really pull it off, and not everyone can pull off this short descent into madness like that character goes through. Colin Fox as the shop owner made for a real dark experience that plays well into the story, as Colin Fox has experience acting in horror shows, one of my personal favorites being Friday the 13th the series. Catherine Short, random that there are two Catherines in the cast list, plays Sabrina, who starts off a bit rough but grows along with Carly Beth. She shows concern only after when Carly Beth goes off the deep end, but that by no way makes her a bad character, as she does her best to be there for her friend until the end. And like I mentioned earlier, she tends to ask a lot of questions, so she's definitely smarter than it seems. Cody Jones plays Noah, while Brenda Bazinet plays Kate, Carly Beth's mother. Although they don't have that many scenes in the episode, they play their roles pretty well. You get the feeling that this is a real family, with the loving mother and the annoyed brother, which works out in the end. Amos Crowley plays Chuck, and George Kanamis plays Steve, who both don't really do much other than torture Carly Beth, which makes them feel rather cartoonish. And sadly, one of the more bland aspects of the episode, They don't really seem to evolve much, and when they do evolve, it's in the sequel to The Haunted Mask, which is another story for another time. One character I can tell you that I really liked was the Haunted Mask itself, because the mask is probably considered the true star of the episode, due to how it's presented, not only by itself, but by other characters. It contrasts with Carly Beth's good girl personality so well. You can feel this eerie presence that you don't get very often. I would say the mask is as iconic as Jason Voorhees' hockey mask, or Michael Myers' mask. You get the sense of evil that lingers. It's what I like to call a symbol of iconic imagery. And today's verdict is no. This episode gets a pass, because I feel it's a strong entry and a strong adaptation of a beloved franchise. While there are some hit and miss things in the episode, that can be said the same for the show. But there are a lot of pros and cons to any piece of media, but the good does outweigh the bad in this specific piece that we talked about today. The Haunted Mask is not an episode that people should skip, as it does make for an interesting watch.
Thank you all for watching, and until next time, I am your undead judge, the Reaper of the Tapes, and you've been watching Tapes on Trial. We will see you next time. Hey you, if you liked this video, make sure to like, comment, favorite, subscribe, and share this video around. If that's not enough, why not go watch another from the channel in the meantime? Don't be too afraid.